Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol-free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Thrive Alcohol Free. I am Dupe, your host, and I'm delighted you're here. So we are over halfway through Dry January. If you're doing Dry January, I'm wondering how it's going. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know how you're doing. But well done you for getting to day 18 of Dry January, and I hope you're finding it okay and you're noticing some benefits and some changes and you're enjoying it along the way. And I'm wondering, what are you going to do once Dry January is over? You're already thinking, oh, I can't wait to have another drink, or are you thinking I might try and do this for a bit longer? I'd encourage you to maybe do 90 to 100 days, because I always think that that is when you really truly see the benefits. But of course, if you just do Dry January, that's not just, there's no just in that at all. It's an amazing achievement, and hopefully it will make you a bit more mindful about what you want to do and how you want to drink going forward. Anyway, I have been delighted actually over the past few weeks. I've been on a few podcasts, and so it's been wonderful to be on the other side. And so I've been on the Over the Influence podcast, the Be Sober podcast, and the Unpause the Menopause podcast. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more about me, I tend to interview people and have guests on, so it was quite nice to tell my story. So if you're interested in that, I'd suggest heading over to those podcasts and having a listen. And they're great podcasts as well. So there are some others that you could potentially listen to. I will put the links in the show notes for you to listen. Okay, so today's guest is Arwen Becker, and I'm delighted to have her on. She's a wonderful person and just a rock star, really. She has helped thousands of women live a better financial life. She spent many years as a financial advisor and 22 years as a co-owner of Becker Retirement Group with her husband, Randy. Mission, which is inspiring and empowering women to rise up and take personal financial responsibility. To further that mission, she devotes her time to training elite financial advisors across the nation to serve women, and so this is US, to serve women more effectively, thus improving how the financial industry speaks to and educates women. And she's also a national keynote speaker, an author, and a contributor to multiple books. Her newest book is She Handled It Retirement, and she's the host of the She Handled It podcast. She's also the creator of the YouVersion Women Money devotional and is often featured as a guest expert on many national news programs and podcasts. So Arwen and Randy are also proud parents of 3 boys and a daughter-in-law. And Arwen is an endurance athlete, which is amazing. And she enjoys early morning runs and long day hikes in the Pacific Northwest. So that's her official bio. And as I said, it's a really lovely conversation with Arwen. And I'm sure you'll get something out of it. And she's very inspiring. And so without further ado, here is the conversation with Arwen. Hi, so welcome, Arwen. Thank you so much for being on the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. It's so lovely to see you.
And you. I'm so excited to have this conversation because I know it means a lot to both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so maybe we'll get started with, if people don't know who you are, then maybe just give a bit of a brief introduction in terms of who you are, what you do, and then we'll go into it.
Well, I would say the long and the short of it is I have a zoology degree, which I got from University of Washington, and I found myself divorced at 24, running a wildlife rehabilitation center. And that major change in my life at 24 actually led me to an entirely new vocation because now I was on my own. I needed to pay my own bills. Working in wildlife was not going to do that as a single woman. And so I entered into a job. At 24, I was hired. I went on one interview, hired by a gentleman who had just launched a financial planning firm. And that was now 23 years ago. The guy that hired me became my business mentor, partner, eventually my husband, and the father of our three boys, my husband, Randy. So that journey led me to becoming a financial advisor in those years. Having run a firm for 23 years, I have done everything under the sun as an entrepreneur, as an employer. We had 14 of us, four of them were advisors by the time we sold our company last June of 2022. And yet the part that I was most excited about was the last 7 years of our company, we turned our focus predominantly on women. So specifically focusing on financial services, mostly retirement planning for women, even though most of our advisors were men and half of our staff were men. We found that that was something that was an area of the market in general, it doesn't really matter where you are, that's vastly underserved. That there's a lot of women, single, divorced, widowed, who need attention, and they need it in a different way than the financial industry tends to give it to them. So that's something that I took on as a focus. It became a passion of mine, and now having sold the company, now I train advisors around the nation how to best and properly market to women. And then I also am an endurance athlete now. So I took that up at the same time.
Just
Yeah.
slip that in. I'm an endurance athlete now.
Why not? Why not become an endurance athlete at 47? It seems like a pretty good thing to do.
Oh, fantastic. And I absolutely love your story. And thank you. You sent me a copy of your book as well. And I I found it really just fascinating to read. And some of the statistics in there as well. It's pretty, we'll go into it. I think it's really interesting for the women that are listening to the podcast, because I think some of the statistics, like 80% of men
Die
die
married. Yeah, die
married and
married. 80%
80%
of women die
women die
single. Yep.
single. And that's
Yeah.
just unbelievable, really, when you think about that. And then if you haven't got your finances in order, or you've been dependent on your partner,
Right.
it can all go a bit awry. So,
And it does. Yeah. Yeah,
mm,
it certainly does. And that's
yeah,
what I want to help women avoid, to
yeah,
take responsibility. And as I call it, she handled it. She handled it was something, it was a term I once used when I was interviewed about my mom. And my
yeah.
mom's a perfect example of a lot of women started from less than 0 at 45 and handled it. She figured out a way to scrape together things, to sacrifice, but she was also really fortunate that her daughter became a financial advisor.
Yeah.
And so I was able to help her along that journey. And there are just hundreds of thousands of women out there, just like my mom, who really need the help. And they need it in a different way than my industry tends to provide it. And so that's why I'm here to help that area of it, my
Mm.
second part of my career.
Amazing, amazing. And so, but I suppose the reason that you're here on the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast is you've just celebrated 2 years alcohol free, which is
I
fantastic.
sure
Yay!
did. One of the best
Well done,
decisions I've ever
you.
made in my life.
Congratulations. I'm sure you've seen so much change in those 2 years. So I'd love to take you back to, I don't know if you want to go back to your zoology days or whenever you started drinking. And I'd love to hear a bit about your journey to then making the decision to stop drinking.
So the time period in which I made the decision was 2 years ago, December of 2021. And I was at a financial event. So this was right before we sold our company. I was at a leadership conference, and they had secured up 10 spots to this endurance race called 29029 Everesting, which I've now done 3 times. But I knew of it at the time. And they said from stage, we have 10 spots. any of you advisors, the first 10 who want to take those spots, we had to pay for it, but that want those spots, run up here. You can secure up one of your positions for it. And he said the date of it, which happened to be my 47th birthday. That was the date of the weekend. And I was like, everything inside of me just leapt. I was like, I have to do this. I have to show myself what I'm capable of as at that time, 46-year-old woman, and remind myself I'm much more capable than I think. And so I did. I signed up for it. And within a couple of days, I felt very strongly that if I was going to be an endurance athlete and hike, so the way in which this endurance event works is you hike 29,029 vertical feet. So the vertical gain of Mount Everest is 29,000 vertical feet. You hike that in less than 36 hours. So that is what it is. You hike up, you ride the gondola down. It's only vertical gain. And so it's a huge ask from a body, right? To do anything for 30 plus hours, hiking straight up and continually. So I thought to myself, well, alcohol is not going to benefit me to becoming an endurance athlete. That much I knew. And I think everybody can agree it will not make me be a better athlete. And so my husband, actually, at that exact same time I had signed up for it, had just hit 1 year sobriety for himself. And that's his journey, but certainly has been part of an impact on our marriage throughout the prior 2 decades. And so he was having this real life-changing experience for him. And so I thought, well, it's not serving me to become an athlete. I'll go ahead and give it up for the next 9 months while I'm training for this. And about 4 months in, I thought, I am never going back. And that's when I really started to understand how alcohol had negatively affected my own life. Aside from my husband's journey, aside from the fact that I grew up in a home where my stepdad was a closet alcoholic, my mom was so good at hiding it that both my sister and I didn't know until I was in my first year of college. That's how good she was at enabling. And so it's not surprising that both my sister and I would marry alcoholics, because we had this modeled behavior of packaging everything up, making sure that everything stayed in order, to not feel the shame and all the other components that come with an individual who's living with an addicted person. So it wasn't really until I started seeing my husband's journey to sobriety and a lot of the books that he was reading, and then I started embarking on this on my own life, that I started really reading some of the literature that he was reading, because we share our same Kindle account. So it was kind of all within this time period of me deciding to give it up that I also was reading some of these books like Alcohol Lied to Me by Craig Beck, which for both of us, both my husband and I, just really was a huge pivotal book for us, because it changed the way we saw alcohol. It wasn't this whole thing about me and mine. It was like this understanding this attractively packaged poison, and starting to kind of tear back the curtains. You're like, wait a second, I've been fooled into thinking that this ethanol is actually somehow acceptable and appropriate because it's pretty and it's lit up great behind a bar and lots of people do it.
Yeah.
And it's part of celebration, all the things that you talk about in your book, right? And you're like, hey, wait a second. And so it was really kind of throughout those components. It was me seeing the positive impact on my husband's life and his productivity, and just the strength in all areas of how his parenting, how his communication style with me, how his physical body and his sleep and all these things improved. But then I also started looking at it for my own life. Even though growing up with an alcoholic, I didn't really see that effect as a youth, because my mom was able to shield us from so much of it. once I had the blinders taken off, I started reading books on, child of alcoholics, and like, gosh, now I see so many of the components that kind of filter in with that. So it was really a mixture of a lot of things. But what I can say, and I'll kind of end on this point, to the credit of your book, and really where your book is different than many of the books that I've read, is I'm like you in that I didn't have some big moment where I had an intervention or somebody sat me down and said, I'm really concerned about how you and alcohol are hanging out together, or had a, morning where I woke up and I didn't remember what happened the night before. I was very good at controlling and moderating.
Mm.
But what I knew is that there was this feeling that I had so many mornings where I woke up and the very first thought I had was, why did I drink last night? I told myself I wasn't going to have a glass of wine when I got home, and I had a glass of wine, and I still feel this little tiny twinge of a headache from just one glass of Chardonnay or whatever it was.
Mm.
And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't break that cycle.
Mm.
And it was really where I recognized it's because even though mine isn't this full blown obvious addiction to alcohol, I'm still addicted to it. It was still a routine part of my life that I knew wasn't serving me, yet was still convincing me I needed it.
Mm.
And so all of these things kind of came together all at once, and me making the decision to commit to something that I knew was going to be very physically demanding and hard for me, the hardest physical thing I was ever embarking on. I knew alcohol wasn't going to help me. And
Mm.
so that was enough to get me over that initial couple of weeks. And then by the time I got a few months under my belt, I was realizing this is an absolute sham, and it's not serving me. It does not make me a more productive human being. It doesn't make me a healthier human being. It doesn't make me a more fun person to hang out with. It just has lied to me on a lot of different fronts, and I no longer want it as a part of my life. And so here I am 2 years later.
Amazing. That's such an incredible story. And I'm fascinated because you said 4 months in, you knew that was it. You're never going back. And I think, to the person that might be listening and thinking, I can't even imagine that making that decision 4 months in. A lot of people they don't want to say forever for a long time. So you've obviously talked about a few things, and the fact that it lied to you and the fact that you realized it wasn't serving you in any way. But do you remember what exactly it was that convinced you at that 4 month mark that that was it, never again?
You know, part of it was that was officially the longest time I'd ever gone without drinking alcohol versus, except for my youth. I had given it up for 3 months when I was involved in a program through my church during that time. And I really feel like it was enough time for me to recognize that, yeah, I totally understand this idea of I'm going to not drink today. Again, saying I'm giving it up for the rest of my life. I actually really feel like I'm done with it, but not everybody is willing to commit to that.
Mm.
But I know that it's not going to serve me today.
Mm.
And so having now being in a place where I was really asking a lot from my physical body and doing a lot more tracking. I had finally got a fitness tracker, and I was now tracking my food and really taking a good hard look at my health too, because again, that was, as I was working towards this endurance race, I realized I had a lot more time. Because when you take alcohol out, it's amazing how much time you have. Even if you're just a regular social, just going out for a glass of wine or two, happy hour a couple nights a week or whatever it might be. And so I just started going, oh, well, what can I read that I might not know about being a woman in her mid 40s and being in better optimal health? And so I just started exploring the topic of nutrition and health in general.
Mm.
And it's just like faith, because I know that you're a woman of faith,
Mm.
that God doesn't want, he's not here to be an overlord to make you change. It's being able to show you something better that makes you want to change.
Yeah.
To say, well, yeah, I still have free will. Yeah, I could go downstairs. I still have wine. We haven't cleared out our wine because part of it is I'm like, well, I don't want to give it to people because I don't feel it serves people. So I'm not like giving away as gifts because it's not serving either of us anymore. But I haven't just like finally just tossed the last, I don't know, 20 bottles that are, sitting down, and we had a wine room thing.
Mm.
But I just wanted to make better decisions. And so knowing that I was concerned about what I was putting in my body, but how I would feel when I needed to do an hour or 2 hours of training tomorrow, it became really obvious that if I do this, have a glass of wine, I will not feel as motivated or as physically capable tomorrow morning in making that choice. So I'm not going to choose to do that today because I know how it's going to make me feel tomorrow.
Mm.
And so it was like enough of those time periods where I was having those conversations, where I was reading enough about nutrition. I was reading about my overall health. I was reading about what it is to be a woman approaching the menopausal years and changes in hormones and things like that I'd never considered before. So it's just like all of these things. But the biggest thing is I just kept researching. I kept reading. I kept hearing new thoughts. I kept listening to new podcasts. I kept following Instagram accounts about sobriety, and I was hearing other people's views on it, and they were reaffirming the goodness that I felt inside. The goodness that I felt when I woke up in the morning, and the first thought I have is I just feel good getting up today. Not I feel bad about myself because I did something yesterday I told myself I wasn't going to do because something had a hold on me. And that was that 24-hour cycle of now I'm going through withdrawals and I need to have a glass of wine to balance it out again. And so it was a myriad of things, but really education, reading, listening, following people who are a little further on the journey, all of those components come together to help get you through those moments where you start to doubt whether or not you actually can. And I think that was really what helped me a lot.
Yeah. And it is, I think it's wonderful. There's so many resources out there now, and that people are talking about it a lot more. And there's so many different journeys as well. So there's going to be someone that you can resonate with, and it doesn't have to be a rock bottom moment. And for
Right.
me, my message is really it's a choice. You've got decision. You are allowed to give yourself permission to make the choice, even though everyone else is doing it. And even though it feels like you're giving something massive up, you're not, you're only
Right.
gaining, and you are bettering your life in so many ways. And from a health perspective, it couldn't be better. I was speaking to someone the other day, and they were saying, really from a vanity perspective, that's one of the reasons that I've carried on not drinking, because I don't want to age. Like, I don't want to age
Yeah.
badly. And we all look
Right.
younger for not drinking as well. So, there's so many positives. But I think
I just love the one that I had heard where somebody said, "Oh, please, you think just getting some this whole thing about, well, the antioxidants that you get from red wine." I just saw somebody had posted, it was like, have a handful of blueberries for God's sakes. It's just like, really? We're going to try and justify a glass of wine for
I
antioxidants when we could
know.
just have some blueberries and get the same thing?
It's so true. All the stories we tell ourselves, it's all red wine's good for the heart, and so one glass a day is fine. And you look back at it now, I look back at it now, and I think, wow,
I
you
know.
are completely brainwashed, aren't you? And you just think, you just go along with the crowd, and the crowd says, this is what you need to do. So that's what you end up doing without really
Right.
ever thinking about it. And I think
Right.
it's what you've talked about is you just made that decision and you've stuck with it, and it's only
Right.
benefited you, which is fantastic. So
Mhm.
4 months in, we've got to 4 months in. So what happened once you made that decision? You obviously went on to do some amazing things. So maybe you'd want to talk about Everesting 3 times. Oh my goodness.
Gosh. Well, I had no intention to set out to become an endurance athlete. And now I can full heartedly say that I've done now at this point five or six endurance events or races since that time. When alcohol is no longer present in your life, you certainly come face to face with, who am I really? Am I, because I often had that question. I always knew I was an athlete. That was something that was the length of my life. I've always been involved in athletics and things like that. But there were certain parts about me, I didn't know if those things really would exist outside of alcohol. Like, am I really that fun and lively, or am I only fun and lively because I have a glass of wine in my hand? Am I really the person who wants to spend time and go to these events and do these different things, or am I only going because I feel obligated to go, and in order to get through it, I need to have a couple of glasses of wine to get through that event? Would I still be going to it? And so it was like this really big revelation, and seeing my husband go through the same thing of, now I really know who I am. I know who I am to the core of who God created Arwen Becker to be. That I am an introvert that has learned the skills of being extroverted, but to the core of who I am, I spend a lot of alone time. I'm ADHD. My son's on the spectrum. My dad's on the spectrum. It's definitely family genetics. And so I need a lot of time alone to process through things. And being around a lot of people is very draining for me. So I used to commit to going to events and parties and things because I felt that I had to do it. And the only thing that would help me enjoy it, quote unquote, enjoy it, would be making sure that I had some drinks while I was there. So when you remove out the drinking component, now you're faced with really the decision, is this something I have to do? Or can I just say no and go, I don't want to go to that. I don't have meaningful conversations with people. It's not furthering any sort of business that I'm trying to grow or whatever that might be. This is not a healthy place for me. And I don't have to go and do that just to make somebody else happy. And so I started to see my real true self emerge, where I could identify, this is really, truly who I am. That if a photograph comes up on the or digital photo thing at home, I don't look at it and go, oh yeah, the reason I was so happy in that picture is because I had already by that point had a couple of drinks in my system. No, I was just happy. Like, when I see the pictures come up when I cross the finish line of these endurance races, the sheer tears and joy and feeling of accomplishment, of pushing myself to a place that a lot of people would choose not to go to, is just deeply fulfilling. And I only want to fill my life up now with things that are truly fulfilling. And I have removed so many of the superficial things out, because once alcohol was no longer this friend I had to take with me in order to get through something, then I just realized what I was truly willing to do. And then I also had the courage and commitment to myself to go, yeah, I'm not getting no joy out of that. So I'm not going. I'm just not going to do it. I want to fill my time with things that bring me joy, that allow me to give and serve and do something greater for the people that I impact, and not just have this superficial drain and waste of time that often a happy hour really is. It's not moving me forward in being a better human being, a better wife, a better mom, a better friend. It's just pulling time from me and, quite honestly, shortening my life, in my opinion, physically, by putting something in my body that my liver and everything else is going, seriously, I have to work on this thing? But I could just work on some of the processed foods you might throw in there every once in a while, or if it comes from the climate or other things that your body has a liver for to process, instead of just shoving a bunch of alcohol on top of it and constantly being in a state of 80%, 85% optimal health. So I really feel that's been the biggest part for me is exploring truly who I have been created to be fully without any additives.
Yeah. And I think that's so wonderful to really know who you are and to be confident in knowing exactly who you are, what you want, and have the courage to say no. So many women just can't set boundaries, can't say no, don't want to say no. It's all about I should, I must, I need to, I have to. You're basically saying I get to do what I
That's right.
want, what that brings me joy, that is actually benefiting me and other human beings. And I'm loving life, and that's amazing. But I imagine to get to that point, you probably went through quite a few emotions and
Oh,
few maybe you want to touch on some of
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, and the thing is I am absolutely a recovering people pleaser. I mean, that's
Mm,
really to the heart of what so many children of alcoholics are. Try to
mm,
keep the peace, try to keep everything packaged up together, try and control everything to feel a sense of control.
yeah.
And when alcohol was removed out, I had to confront my lack of boundaries on things that when I really thought about it, again, without being able to utilize alcohol to soften the anxiety that it would create side of me to say, no, I'm not willing to do that. Or, just set reasonable boundaries to be able to acknowledge my feelings as valid about certain things, even if they made somebody else disappointed or unhappy or whatever it was. There was a significant amount of time to process through that. And part of that came through therapy. Both my husband and I are very, very committed to the benefits of having an outside person who can run interference and help to balance out a conversation as you're trying to bring words to the ways in which you feel. And so a lot of what we had to learn is a new level of healthier communication
Mm,
because he had to go through that himself. I mean, when he communicates with a lot of words. He's going to be much more apt to say things very quickly in a moment of hurt, frustration, anger, or things of that nature. Whereas I do the exact opposite. I want to process through as much of it as I possibly can before it comes out of my mouth, because whatever comes out of my mouth, I mean, I am really committed to the things that I say.
mm,
And so there's a difference on how we communicate. So I would get very flustered. He would come at me with too many things. I would feel I need to be in this big defensive mode instead of just going, this is no longer a healthy conversation. We're going to stop it right now, or I'm going to leave.
mm,
I'm going to leave the room because this is no longer healthy and we can come back to it later. I had to learn that skill. I mean, I really thought I needed to just to sit and defend every point that was coming out of his mouth in a moment of frustration. And yet the anxiety that a people pleaser, that a person who has perfectionist tendencies like myself, there is a lot of anxiety when you set a boundary. And I think where a lot of individuals get it wrong is they think there isn't going to be the anxiety when the boundary is set.
mm,
But the truth is, I had to learn to live in that state of anxiety until it passed. Because the only way you get through that is either getting through it, waiting enough time, the anxiety passes, and then you move on, and then you're proud of yourself because you set a boundary. Or, and what tends to happen, you cave on the boundary. Because you cave on the boundary, and now it's at least momentarily alleviated my anxiety because I was
mm,
holding a boundary that I knew was best for me, but I was getting resistance around me. And that I think is one of the biggest things that when I have talked to women, especially women in talking to a spouse or partner about money, and maybe that conversation hasn't happened a lot,
mm,
they're thinking that somehow when the boundary gets set or when they have this conversation, there's not going to be fallout, negative fallout, and negative emotions. But the truth is, we have to learn how to live in that anxiety. And as we do it more, it's just like not drinking. over time it becomes easier because we learn new skills. It doesn't bother us as much over this long period of time. We don't carry it into every moment of our day. You learn skills, and it over time becomes a lot easier to say no, or to say I'm not willing to do this, or to say, let me tell you how, when you said that, this is how it made me feel. And I
Mm.
need to communicate that with you. It doesn't change the dynamic, but I have the right to communicate my feelings. That's how it made me feel.
Mm.
And then moving on. And so that's the thing, that when you have, if you go to alcohol, you will have a momentary relief from that anxiety. But make no mistake, that anxiety will still exist. It did not get eliminated. It will still be there. And now you just have the added guilt and shame that often comes along. If you had, like I did for a number of years prior to actually giving up alcohol, been thinking, this isn't serving me anymore, but yet why am I still doing it?
Mm.
And why do I feel shame? And why do I admire people who have found a way to give up alcohol and they're living this joy-filled life
Mm.
without it? Why can't I?
Mm.
And so it's, you have to go in with the right mindset. There's definitely a bumpy time period of understanding yourself, and then certainly the people around you getting reacquainted with the new person that you
Yeah.
have evolved into, the person that you always were, but it was shrouded a little bit.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's so common what you described in terms of realizing that you are more of an introvert and you've learned to be an extrovert, and learning that knowing that you're a people pleaser, perfectionist, and all people that I meet who stop drinking, that they realize these things. And actually, you've described how to set boundaries and how to just get through that anxiety so well. So I really appreciate you talking to that, because I think that's going to be so helpful for the listener. And my husband stopped drinking 2 years after I stopped drinking. So he's just celebrated a year alcohol free, which
It's
is
awesome.
amazing. And I never thought I'd ever see that. And it's just been incredible. And so I absolutely get it. But I'd love to. You talked about obviously the dynamic and having better conversations and communicating better. But when your husband stopped drinking, you said it was a year apart. Do you think that's one of the, I know obviously the challenge set the seed, but would you say that you were noticing things that made you question it, but maybe you thought you couldn't because you didn't have a problem and there was nothing wrong with you? So why would I stop? Or I'd just love to hear
Right.
your insights on
Yeah,
it.
no, I think that's, yeah, it's a great question. So truthfully, I wanted to make sure he was giving it up for himself.
Mm.
That there was many times throughout the years that I had tried and pushed him, or tried to, let's do this together, or whatever, things like that, or at least giving it up for a time. And that just wasn't something that he was open to.
Mm.
And so I intentionally was not going to give up alcohol just yet, because I wanted to see that he really had the capability, that, like, if we went on a vacation and I had a glass of wine, that he wasn't sitting there just like dying inside. And this was just like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. And he never made any comments. When he made the decision, it was his decision and his decision alone. He
Mm.
knew it no longer was good for him.
Mm.
And so part of me, I think I just needed something that just kind of solidified the fact that he hit his 1 year, and I wanted to just join in with him at that point, and then
Mm.
say, it's not served him. It did not serve my stepdad, and how that affected my mom and our family. My kids, especially our younger boys, had seen the negative effects of alcohol in the household, and then also had seen the positive changes that their dad had been making.
Mm.
And so I was thinking, well, how can I really support my kids in this, if they're going, wait, so it wasn't good for dad, so why are you still doing it? These are the, conversations I'd be having in my own head. How do I best support my kids in all of this? And for me, it only had one answer. It was just how was I going to go about that answer for my own self. So he hit 1 year of sobriety, and at that same time I was like, that's when I kind of hadn't been drinking for a couple of days, and then I got the offer to do this endurance race, and it just all came together all at the same time. And I was like, I want my anniversary to be the same time that his is, which I think mine's officially like a day before it or something. But it just was another added component that really, when it came down to it, I knew that it had a negative effect on many people. And I didn't want to still have it be justified to my younger kids. I couldn't do anything about our older son who was already in college and out of the house and things like that. We've had multiple conversations about it, but he didn't see the really big change time with his dad that the two younger boys had seen. So they have different views than their older sibling does on alcohol. So that was part of it. It just, I couldn't reconcile it any other way, because if it was really as negative as I knew it was, and really believed to my core at that point it was, why would I still be doing it? And how do my kids navigate that?
And how do they see alcohol now?
Well, they definitely see the negative effects of it, and they see how positive it can be, because they saw just the major changes in how their dad handled things, and how present he was, how things that might help justify away for a number of years, they were just because of alcohol. They weren't, there was no other reason for it. And so we have a lot more conversations around it. They're going in certainly with eyes much more wide open than either my husband or I had as kids, because I came from a family where I never saw anybody drink. Didn't mean that it wasn't happening, but I didn't see it. And when we had family events, there wasn't alcohol at my grandmother's house or anything like that. And then my husband, kind of the same thing, grew up, just never saw his parents drink. That wasn't a thing that they did either. He was introduced to it through a girlfriend, and her parents would bring alcohol into the household, and they were alcoholics and things of that nature. And so that was his foray into it. The beauty is our kids have the conversation. And, the truth is, what I love to say, it'd be great if they grew up in a family that didn't drink. Yeah, that would be great. However, there is something to be said about being able to see a contrast, being old enough, because they were old enough at the time, we're like 12 and 14. They were old enough to see this and to have these conversations, because junior high, obviously there's a lot of this, it's starting to percolate with kids that age, at least conversations and such. And so it just really afforded them there's two sides of this. So at least they're armed with more understanding than if they never saw alcohol be drank and they never saw any of the bad things. And then they also didn't grow up in just these raging alcoholic homes where it's like, I will never, ever, and just have such a negative component attached to alcohol and the fallout and everything. So it's a nice balance to at least give them a little more food for thought than I think a lot of kids their age would have. And we can have conversations about it. I'm like, oh, what do you think about that? That's rough. Look at that. I mean, the person's they're drinking on, they're having 3 shots, and then they're getting into their car, on whatever show it is, and then they're driving home. That's horrible. But it's been so normalized.
Yeah, it's so true.
I have a friend whose brother head on killed somebody 2 years ago, is serving 10 years. I lost somebody as a 13-year-old. She was our babysitter. She was head on by a drunk driver, her and her brother coming home from college. She was killed. Brother is now living the rest of his life with his parents because he's mentally disabled because of alcohol. That doesn't happen by drinking too many Diet Cokes. Little too much saccharin or aspartame is not going to cause that.
Yeah. Mm,
but something that we allow and that we make it seem so sexy and wonderful. We don't show the fallout
mm,
of massive hangovers and lives being ruined, and or just like me, the quiet moments of self-deprecation
mm,
where
mm,
I just didn't feel my best.
mm,
And I just don't want to live in that space anymore. And I love the fact that you're helping other people see that there is another side to this, and it doesn't have to come with killing somebody
mm,
or waking up and not remembering what yesterday was.
mm, mm.
It doesn't have to be that in order to make a better choice, that you will be shocked at how amazing your life is on the other side of it.
Mm, yeah, thank you. And it's just being brave enough to take that step, isn't it? And seeing what is on the other side. And a lot of it comes down to fear and the unknown and people worrying about what people think or will
Right.
think and having to justify, if you're not drinking, well, you must have had a problem or you're pregnant or whatever, and then having to navigate all of that. And so that was, pretty hard hitting what you said, but it's true. It's a real dangerous substance and it's highly addictive. So regardless of who you are, it's an addictive substance. So you are going to become addicted to it at some point, or it's going to be such a habit that it's going to be difficult for you to
Right.
stop. And that's completely normal. That's what it does. But so many
Yep.
people live in the world of I'm watching a movie and oh my goodness, that person's so glamorous and sophisticated, and that's what it does. And you're right, you don't see the aftermath. You don't see how they really feel the next day because they don't show that to you. And that's the
Nope.
industry. That's the point. So
Nope.
um well said. Okay, so why don't we? I'd love to touch on congratulations on your second book. Has that come from you not drinking as well? Would you say that the idea for the second
Well, what
book?
I can tell you is my husband and I selling our company in June of last year, one of the biggest components to our company being so healthy was because both of us weren't drinking.
Mm,
When my husband removed that component out, the amount of time he had to really dive into a lot of the numbers and the productivity and the profitability of our firm and leading people and encouraging and being the leader that he'd always been, but was muted by just the way he felt in the morning
mm,
oftentimes, and now running on all cylinders just really afforded us the ability to clean up any of the areas within our company that needed to be fine tuned
mm,
and make it to something that was it was so healthy
mm.
that somebody wanted to buy it and wanted to buy it for an amount that was reasonable to what we were willing to sell it for.
Yeah.
And both of us give a huge amount of credit to that.
Mm,
Especially for him, because I mean, we'd both co-own this company, but I was really starting to focus on speaking and training advisors in the last couple of years. And so he was really the huge driving force still of the productivity of that company. When he now was running everything towards that goal, not even a goal of selling it, it just God has a way of creating the opportunity when the time is right.
yeah.
But it was truly remarkable. And so for me now to do what I know I have been called to do, which is to train financial advisors across the US to be able to best and properly market financial services to women, and to be really thoughtful about how they do it, and to do it with a mission, with passion, and just real concern for women getting served well. Selling the company allowed that. But then as I looked at this next season of my career, of my life, now knowing that I'm doing everything outside of, or I'm doing everything in context of who I am, where I'm being called to be, that it's not with again, this like some little hidden thing over here that I was like, well, I don't really feel that great when I get on the call this morning because I drank a little too much last night or whatever it was. Again, probably in my house, if I just all justified, I was all safe. It was only 2/3 of a bottle of wine. All the justifications that we come up with.
Yeah.
But now to be able to do that wholeheartedly and to know that what people are getting from me is 100% of who I am, as authentic as I can humanly be, and to just give the excess that I have, that now as your health gets better, you are better at what you do. You make you either, money is not always the component that we're focused on, but I'm telling you, when you are firing on all cylinders mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically,
Yeah.
when all of those components are working, it's unbelievable
Yeah.
how finances fall in line, how you spend differently, you give differently, you serve and give into relationships that you otherwise wouldn't have had the extra capacity to serve and to pour into. Again, we can only pour out what it is that we have. And if we're depleted and we're run down and we're working on 80% versus I want to constantly try and figure out a way to get like 103%. So I just have more to pour out of me. And being a really healthy 48-year-old is allowing me to do that because I'm spending this extra time working on how I can just be a better, healthier version of myself. And so doing those things, all of that comes into play. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity when I do keynotes to get up in front of 100, 200, 300 more people and to do something that always provides me nervousness and butterflies, and to get up on a stage and deliver something meaningful to people that moves them to emotion and tears, and know that 100% of what I'm pouring in is truly coming from who I am, not from something. Because I did, when I started my speaking career, I would have a shot of tequila before I got on stage because I was so nervous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, it took the edge off.
Mm.
But then it made me wonder, would I really be like that on stage if I didn't have that thing to soften me up and make me be a little more fun and free? And no, I just had to learn to be more relaxed naturally. And so I'm not ashamed to say that I did that. It was just part of my history. And it never had more than one, but still, my husband's like, what? You're having a glass of wine before you get up on stage? He's like, oh, I don't have the guts to do that because he did speaking for 17 years. I'm like, well, good for you. This is what I'm having to get over my anxiety. But now it's like, I love it. I can stand on stage in full anxiety and know this is who I am, and you're going to get every bit of it. And I am going to pour myself out in a bigger way than I ever would, because there would be something that would be tempering my abilities, even though we think that alcohol makes us better at things. Such a lie. Oh my God, that's such a lie. So now I get to give everything of me and know it's coming from exactly the place that God created it for, that designed it as, and I'm just continuing to hone this instrument that is my body and my mind and my voice, and being able to use it in a way that moves people forward to the right place, not more of the same that's keeping them held captive.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So inspiring, so inspiring. And I think it's it's interesting, isn't it? Because so many people, I can't remember what percentage, but percentage of people who fear public speaking over death, that's sort of like, that's the worst thing. So, I'm sure it's really encouraging for people to hear that you, as an accomplished speaker who speaks all the time, still has that anxiety, and that's completely normal. And so you don't
Totally
need
normal.
alcohol to temper that, because that is just your reaction. And actually the anxiety or the butterflies, although we always go to the fact it's nervousness, it's the same thing as excitement. So you can choose what it is
Right.
that you've actually got, and
Right.
is it excitement or is it nervousness? And then how do you use that to your advantage when you do step out on stage or speak on a
Yep.
podcast or whatever it is you do? So
Precisely.
yeah,
Precisely.
brilliant, brilliant. Did you want to talk about your book? Give
Well,
people
my new book, yeah, my
a
new book is called She Handled It: Retirement, an Inspiring and Empowering Financial Guide for Women Over 40. So I think a lot of us, and you can find it on Amazon, a lot of us think about retirement as this thing that you do at 60. And the truth of the matter is, we have to start planning in our 40s and 50s
Mm,
so that when we get into our 60s, we have a better idea of how we navigate this space, which is it's a challenging place to be. I mean, it's very mentally challenging to eventually give up work and what you tie your value or your day-to-day routine to. There's a lot of components that have to do with that. But I mean, the pretty obvious component: where's the money going to come from? Tell me I'm going to be okay. How do I know I'm going to be safe? And it's just understanding a lot of the basic components, and everything I teach in story.
mm,
So all the financial components that are in there are either personal stories about me and some of my financial missteps, a lot about my mom's journey, and then just 23 years of serving individuals and couples, and some of the great things I've seen and some of the really terrible, just gut wrenching stories that I've also seen of people making decisions that were not good, not necessarily financial decisions, but those too. But typically it was either not speaking up and getting their needs met and making sure they had the education or direction that they needed, or it was putting too much emphasis in what their spouse was telling them was happening or needed to happen,
mm.
and not getting the information for themselves, and them being left to figure out how to pick up all the pieces once their spouse dies,
Yeah.
which, you know, is the predominant. Most of us as women are going to find ourselves single at some point.
Mm. Well, I'm sure it's going to help so many people, and I'll put a link in the show notes for people to get the book as well. So thank you for writing a second book. I think
Absolutely.
that's amazing. Will there
Thank
be a
you.
third?
Probably. I want to write one specifically to women who are in their 20s, 30s,
Yeah.
in the early. So how all the things I probably didn't do, because I made a man my financial plan when I was in my 20s, and it ended in divorce. So that didn't start off well. Let's just say that.
And I'll look forward to that as well. And
Absolutely.
and it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. So before we end, I always end this with all my guests. And so I'd love to hear, you've talked about so many different things, but in a nutshell, what does thriving alcohol free mean to you?
It's honestly just living fully authentic into who you've been created to be. It's not having anything else that tempers, changes, alters who you've been designed to be to others on this planet. That is it. I can't, I mean, the whole idea of authenticity, when you remove a substance that alters who you are, when you remove that, you find out fully who you are. And I pray to God that you help work on those areas that you're not happy with.
Mm,
But at least now you have all the faculties to focus on that. But then you also fully embrace who you've been created to be and the gifts that have been placed inside of you
mm,
that need to be brought to the world, and tempering those or downplaying them or removing them because of a substance, you're just doing a disservice to yourself, but more importantly to the generations of people that your life here is supposed to connect with and inspire and improve.
mm. Oh, such a wonderful answer. Thank you. So, is there anything else? Any final thoughts? Any nugget that you want to leave the listener with?
Well, I would say absolutely to pick up your book, because your book it's unlike a lot of the books that I've read. It really does speak to what does being alcohol free look like when you haven't had a rock bottom moment. And I thought that was a very refreshing view of it. And then as it relates to, if you just want daily encouragement, I'm on all platforms, but really I spend a lot of my time on Instagram. So Arwen Becker, it's Arwen. It comes out of Lord of the Rings. That's where my name comes from. But Arwen Becker, and I really just put out content that's encouraging, uplifting, inspiring. Right now I'm raising money for the Kyle Pease Foundation, which is for inclusion in sports for individuals with disabilities. And so, I know you're a marathon runner, half marathon runner. You enjoy doing those types of things, as do I. But there's a lot of individuals out there who would never get the opportunity to run a half marathon unless somebody pushes them, and they get to experience that joy. So I'm raising money for the Kyle Pease Foundation. So I talk about that on my Instagram as well. So if anybody wants to support that, I would love to be able to have more people get to be involved in some great sports in 2024. And that's part of what I'm doing as well.
That's so fantastic. You have really fully stepped into your purpose, Arwen. And, I think you're such an inspiring woman. So thank you so, so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
You too.
Well, thank you, Arwen. That was such a wonderful conversation, and I really, really appreciate you being a guest on the podcast. So I hope you enjoyed that and it gave you some food for thought. It's amazing what taking a break from alcohol can lead to, and I hope that inspired you in some way. And so I wanted to remind you that as it's Dry January, I do have a sale on quite a few things. So you can get my paperback and my Kindle version of my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. That's on sale at the moment, and the links are in the show notes. And you can also get, if you don't want to do coaching at the moment and just want to explore taking a break on your own, then you can also get my self-paced online course, which is a companion to the book, A Cocktail of Clarity as well. And that's currently half price. So if you are interested in any of those, feel free to go and check those out. And of course, feel free to reach out. Let me know if you've got any questions, if you want to hear anything else specific on the podcast. And I'd love it if you could rate or review the podcast as well, if you're enjoying it. I've had some really lovely feedback recently on the podcast, so I'm really pleased that you're enjoying it. Okay, so I hope you have a wonderful week, and keep going if you're doing Dry January. I'm really proud of you. I'm rooting for you, and know that I'm cheering you on along the way. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my signature Thrive Alcohol Free Society group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.